Hello and welcome everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Ali Mukhtar, how are you? He's like myself. He's on the East Coast of the United States, and it's 1:45 in the morning. So thank you for making time. So this just speaks to his passion for supporting NIC, and he's a fellow board member as well. Tremendously grateful to you for giving us your time. I thought that we should invite one of our future trailblazing entrepreneurs as well. So I've got Omair Ansari, who basically launched his business probably, Omair, what, a year ago, and is off to the races. I mean, he told me certain valuation metrics that people are talking about that are staggering, and I am, mashallah, so ever delighted to hear of that. Is Faisal with us, or is he?
Yes, I'm here.
I don't see you. Are you?
I'm actually sitting. I'm sitting post at the club, so I had the video off. So maybe that's not coming on the screen.
Okay, sounds good. And then Atif Awan couldn't join us, unfortunately. He had to travel, and he's on a plane at the moment. So thank you again. Let me do a quick round of introductions. Not that these are really needed, but I'll just give a quick snippet. So Ali Mukhtar is the founder and CEO of Fatima Ventures and Fatima Gobi Ventures, which is a partnership with Gobi partners in Asia. I would say that, so first of all, Ali, congratulations on the wonderful news today that CDC has committed anchor capital to Fatima Gobi Ventures. And I'm pretty certain that you're now the largest or one of the largest venture capital firms in Pakistan, having invested in close to 40% of all of the fundraising that has happened, including Airlift, Tajir, SafePay, Sasta Ticket, and Tag. And I'm sure I've missed something, so we'd love for you to correct it and share more with us. We are also joined by my friend Faisal Aftab, who's the co-founder of Zayn Capital. Zayn is a MENA and South Asia focused venture capital firm with offices in London and in Pakistan. He, like Ali, has had tremendous impact on the local venture capital world, having invested in Grocer App, K-Trade, Truck It In, BookMe.pk, Rumi.pk, The Gallery, MandiExpress.pk, and Knowledge Platform. He was previously the leading Laxon Venture Capital, where he built the firm from ground up. And an interesting point about him, I mean, he's an early Bitcoin and Ethereum investor, so I don't know why he's even bothering doing what he does. He's a graduate from Oxford, with degrees from Michigan State University as well. And I forgot to mention, and Ali is a fellow graduate of the Wharton School at UPenn. And then with alongside the investors, like I said, we've got Omair Ansari, who I met a few years ago in New York when he was a star emerging markets portfolio manager at Morgan Stanley, working with one of my closest friends who spoke exceptionally highly of him and introduced me to him. And then all of a sudden I heard, he lost Omair to Pakistan, and he was baffled in terms of what had happened. And, but lo and behold, there he is. A year later, he's off to the races and raising a heck of a lot of money and doing us all proud. So I figured that, the perspective of this panel, really is about capital raising and, your entrepreneurial journeys of why you left such a, fantastic, job that people would die to have with Morgan Stanley doing emerging markets out of New York, to go back and do that. But also equally importantly, talk to Ali, who, everyone knows about Fatima Group. It's one of the largest conglomerates in the country. and has chosen venture to be his calling and not part of the many other growing aspects of his family business. So maybe we kick it off there, Ali. What brought you to venture? And why not fertilizer or sugar or tons of other things that you could easily have done?
I think so. The idea for us, so first of all, thank you for having me, and I'm really excited to be here. I think the idea stemmed from not that other businesses I still think have tremendous growth potential in the country across the spectrum, but the motivation here was I had personally seen so many success stories of Pakistanis doing exceptionally well in other parts of the world. So the idea started with, what if similar platforms can be created locally to enable the same success that we're seeing today, and to create large both social as well as financial impact. So that's where the motivation was, and I started in 2015 with my first investment. Everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong. That sparked greater curiosity, and that led us to where we are today.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And do you want to share some news around your own capital raise, or is it not public? I think Ali's connected
in terms of I can talk about the fund. So we're
Ali,
can you hear me now?
No, it's breaking up a lot. I wonder if you want to turn off your video feed to see if that might make it. Oh, there you go. Now we see you.
Let me.
So why don't I give Faisal a call, and in the meanwhile you can log back in. Okay. Faisal, I mean, I know from
better. Otherwise, I can switch the. Sure.
Everyone complains about internet in emerging markets, but
and he's sitting in Boston. Faisal, I met you in New York as well many moons ago. You were an enterprising young man with bright ambitions and great corporate career, leading to several startup ideas. So walk us through your journey to venture in Pakistan. Tell us why, and walk us through the steps.
Sure. Thanks, Fatima, for having me on the panel. Really appreciate it. Always a pleasure to be at the NIC. So for me, this was more, you can say, I think we've talked about it many times, more of a global macro thing where, I felt Pakistan, given the state the world was in post 2008, would be one of the countries that's going to rise. When we look at the pattern, what happened post 1998, where you saw the Eurozone come together, and you saw all the countries like Spain, Italy rise post the last contraction. Then 2008, we saw the BRICS rise. And the next 11 were the ones that were effectively poised for some level of growth after the next crisis, whenever that would be. And so for me, it was a more concerted, planned effort. And that's why I timed my move around 2016 to Pakistan. What ended up happening is that incidentally, the new growth was going to be tech, given that we are at the tail end of the industrial age, and we have now pretty much post March of 2020 entered the information age in full bloom. So for me, when I look at Pakistan, I feel that it's one of those countries that has a massive potential. We have a massive informal economy. I would say probably 2x of the documented economy. It's very speculatively, that's my assumption here. And technology is going to be, tech platforms are going to be the documentation of that informal economy, because everything that all of us are investing in ultimately are capturing offline transactions or economic activity that otherwise would just never be logged in any paper-based system. But in technology, even if it's settled in cash, it's logged. So quintessential example would be Kareem that everybody's aware of is it's a general ledger as the way I see it is because it's a ride hailer and it's a driver. It's that same transaction that was happening for years, but now it's being logged at least on the tech platform, and even though it's being settled in cash, and therefore you're seeing that growth in the company. And this is what's happening with all these companies across the board. Ali and I share a couple of portfolio companies we're co-investors in. We're seeing this in the trucking space at Truck It In. I mean, they're capturing that segment that was entirely, you would say, this fragmented segment. And you're just seeing the monthly growth, and just baffles the mind that, given what Pakistan is considered from at least a global macro perspective on a GDP measure, this type of growth should not be happening if those numbers are accurate. So that was the whole thesis on Pakistan. Still extremely bullish. I don't think the macros from a traditional economy sense make too much of a difference when it comes to tech, because every time a person leaves the traditional economy and moves to the digital economy, there's growth happening here. And so lots of growth ahead.
And so how do you distill from that macro thesis down to the underlying investment opportunities? Because obviously, there are many ways to leverage those themes, and you choose to do so through a long-dated, illiquid investment in venture. And why is that?
So it's lag effects that you just trace from other economies, right? And when you look at allocations of capital, whether the way the world invests, especially in these frontier markets, is through blocks. So it's MENA, Southeast Asia. It would have been South Asia, but we have geopolitics in the region. So therefore, it creates a Pakistan opportunity because we're gated. Where, let's say, big Indian platforms. India's gotten way more funding than Pakistan. It's in something to the tune of just last year was something to the tune of like $14 billion, whereas ours is barely. I think ours last year was like 50 or $60 million. So that lag effect is what we're tracing. And so it's about timing when you're deploying capital. So I'll give you an example. Like I've been looking at your electronic vehicle plays, but I don't think the timing is correct right now. I mean, those may be the important plays 2-3 years from now, because there's a lot of ESG money that it does have to allocate. So it's really just matching capital allocation mandates with essentially what the opportunity is in Pakistan. And our talent is no less than India. I think we have better talent than MENA. People are a lot sharper in Pakistan. We have a huge civil society that's always existed. And that allows us to basically perform. So, I mean, there's multiple factors, demographics, taking into account capital flows, our connectivity rate, all these things. And then you try to take a decision. Obviously, everything I'm saying is speculative because that's what we're in the business of, right? I'm just a long-term investor. So I don't usually do short-term trades. So for me, venture capital is a natural progression in life.
Right, that's great. And Omair, I mean, you were an equity analyst, with very much a global macro bent. And you were doing EM for the most part you ran the frontier markets fund at Morgan Stanley. How did you view this opportunity in Pakistan from that top-down lens, and having access to somewhat liquid ways of investing in Pakistan through the equity or debt markets, or even through the sovereign paper, you decided to go and actually relocate your family back to Pakistan and launch your fintech venture. How does that story fit into that overall equation and the stage that Faisal has just said? Do you concur with that thinking? And
Yeah, look, I think the macro call was married with the micro call, right? I think the issue which we found, especially on Morgan Stanley and before even when I was at Renaissance Capital, was a lot of the public markets and even some of the private markets, you're not able to really play the underlying economic growth of the country. There's segments within the economy which are just growing at a much faster pace, similar to what Faisal kind of alluded to, the idea that there is this underground economy which is not documented, right? Now that documentation will happen. And I remember the days of Indonesia about 4 or 5 years ago, which is very similar to Pakistan. And I know this has now become very standard for everyone to understand, saying, yeah, compare it to Indonesia, but it's true. 4 or 5 years ago, people looked at Indonesia the same lens that they look at Pakistan, I'd say a year ago. I think it's catching up quickly. But the idea was you're really not able to play the growth segments of the economy through the public market. The public market didn't allow, from a regulation standpoint, for a lot of these companies that were capturing the growth of the economy to be listed. So we were stuck sitting on this capital from a public market perspective to not be able to really capture growth in the economy. I mean, I'm not buying Pakistan to growth story by holding HBL or MCB, right? I mean, that's not the growth story of Pakistan. The growth story is much more micro. And that's where I think across the globe, this is happening now, where you're seeing it's moving more from private down to venture, because I'm able to grow at, I mean, say even 200, 300x a month, right? While the average company, obviously it's the idea of the size of the company as well, but the base effect kicks in where you're only growing about 10, 15%, if that. So for me, it was a call of saying, look, if Indonesia can do this, if Nigeria can do this, if Kenya can do this specifically on the fintech space, and I think on the macro side, things are looking much better given where politics are, as well as from an economic standpoint, there's no reason why Pakistan can't be the same. And so that's really what drove me about 2, 3 years ago to say, hey, if I don't do something in Pakistan, I know someone else will. And so I see a huge opportunity when it comes to the fintech space over here. And that's kind of the beginning of the journey.
Yeah, and so, for the benefit of our audience, can you speak a little bit about what your venture is and what exactly is Abhi?
Yeah.
Also, maybe speak a little bit about your core anchor investor, that was Vostok, which is a foreign fund that gave you incubation capital to come do things in Pakistan. This is amazing ratification of the opportunity that exists and the compelling nature of it. So please, if you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, it's a funny story. I mean, 2, 3 years ago was when I started this thesis of Pakistan is going to go the Indonesia route. And I sat down with David Nangle at Vostok because I was advisor to them for about 3, 4 years, even while at Morgan Stanley. So we were doing all these transactions across the globe in Brazil, Indonesia, India, but never Pakistan. I mean, only Finja was there, but it was an early transaction. After that, nothing really. I'm like, what am I missing here? I'm seeing the pattern recognition over here, but why are you as an investor? And it wasn't just from a public, Morgan Stanley, we barely did anything in Pakistan. And then on the private perspective as well, we weren't seeing much happen. So I sat with him and said, why are you not doing more in Pakistan? And he turned around and said, look, it's been difficult for us from a regulatory standpoint. It was very similar to Egypt back then, where there just wasn't a lot of support for fintech. So we're a little bit weary of that. 2, not many foreign investors in the market, and though we like to be early, we don't want to be too early. And then that conversation turned into, but if you do something in Pakistan, we'll back you. And so that's essentially the thesis and the genesis of it, of where I started really paying a lot more attention to Pakistan and saying, okay, if I were to do something, what would it be? Now, fintech is a very broad statement. And I really despise using that cliche word of fintech, because I think that's what people have been raising capital in the back of. Really, what is fintech? It's a democratization of finance. A democratization of finance only really happens in a way where you're fixing manual pain points. And when you fix manual pain points, that's where digital adoption happens. So if you rewind to, for example, M-Pesa in Kenya, the simple pain point was that people in the south of Kenya, so Nairobi, could not send money back home north. They were doing it very physically. People are sending cash through literally vans. That cash would be stolen along the way. And that's where M-Pesa came along through Safaricom and says, okay, let's create a digital way of us to be able to do this. And that's where they were able to start the basis of fintech and then go into other products. So in Pakistan, I said, okay, what is that manual pain point that exists? Because digital adoption doesn't just happen overnight. Even now, everyone talks about COVID and acceleration of digital. Yes, it has happened. However, I'll tell you now, when I, for example, order Food Panda every day, 95% of the time, the guy wants cash and doesn't want credit, right? It's still a very cash-based society. So how do you solve for cash and a manual pain point? And what is that manual pain point? Our manual pain point that we basically focus on is people living paycheck to paycheck. What is Abhi? Abhi, exactly as the word says, is we get your cash now. When you are living paycheck to paycheck, you really only have 2 to 3 ways for you to be able to access interim financing. And one is to go to your family and friends. So 95% of Pakistanis, banked and unbanked, go to their family and friends first to ask for a loan before they go to even an institution or they go to any other means. So that's, I mean, izzat ki baat hoti hai. You don't want to keep on going to your family and friends and asking for money. Two, you go to your employer and you say, hey, can I get an advance of my salary? And you square it up. Now that's a tedious process. What we do is we come in, we tie up with businesses, and we give the entire employee base access to their earned wages under 30 seconds. So we have a proprietary app, two-way SMS, web portal, and a WhatsApp feature. And literally, they'll be able to see on a live basis how much money they've earned by the minute, and they're able to withdraw that in under 30 seconds. And we square that up with your employer at the end of the month. So that's a very basic model that we're running.
That's great. Ali, so we've seen a massive influx of international investors into Pakistan recently. I mean, in large deals, I mean, that have aggregated to $300 million just this year alone. I would say that you were the pioneer in bringing foreign capital into our country through your partnership with Gobi, which is one of the preeminent Southeast Asia focused venture capital firms. So what did Gobi see in Pakistan that our Pakistani people hadn't seen that brought them here and help you accelerate the fundraising process and then deployment of that capital, leading to the CDC investment today in your fund?
So if you look at Gobi's history, so they started in the early sort of days of China in late 90s, early 2000s, and this is when the Silicon Valley capital was just beginning to enter China. A lot of the same skepticism existed in China back then. And so they were lucky to be there at that time and saw the ecosystem develop from the very early days. And then were also early, because they had seen that China story play out, they were early to enter, Southeast Asia and countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and also they had learned from a lot of the mistakes they had made in China, as well as things that went really well. So with that understanding, they went into Southeast Asia and then obviously recognized very similar patterns existing in Pakistan, across the verticals that they had invested in, and that was, they had seen it over and over again. So it wasn't hard for them to see it happen in Pakistan, right? So they were already convinced, and we were then able to partner with them to sort of create a structure where we can leverage that regional experience together with our presence in the country.
Right. And I think it's, to me, this is fascinating because each investment you make essentially is ratified by their experience as well, and they have, as you've noted, a breadth of experience across many different markets, and the fact that they feel compelled to put money to work, in Pakistan, is a vindication of the great opportunity. So let's turn the focus a little bit more on understanding, what it is that you look for, when you're making an investment. And, Ali, you mentioned that, in 2015, when you started, and it was roughly the same time that, we founded, 47 Ventures and started investing in Pakistan, teething issues. I mean, the pace of capital deployment was very, very slow initially. It was painfully difficult to put money to work. And then all of a sudden, I mean, the opportunities seem to have leapfrogged the size of our funds. So walk us through it. Like, what were you looking for? What did you see? And what transpired that all of a sudden there's this kind of, improvement in the opportunity set for investors to put money to work in Pakistan?
I think fundamentally it's, back in 2014, 2015, internet users, as we all know, were 20, 25 million internet users. We've talked about this before, but we saw a lot of markets where, post launch of mobile internet ventures, especially on the consumer side, 5 to 7 years post that really starts to take off. And then, simply because you have that inflection point in terms of the addressable market, number of users. So I think the primary reason was that. And then, on the policy side, a lot of things have been streamlined, both from structuring perspective as well as, vertical specific policies, like in the fintech space and several others. So that's there. Then in terms of where, the global capital environment, there's a lot more liquidity that is now being channelized into the country. So it's a number of factors that are there. Pakistan has always had a large talent base that was previously working on, services that is now moving or transitioning towards building products for the local market.
How's the talent pool morphed into more successful entrepreneurs than before? I mean, for instance, obviously, a great deal of macro hindrances have been removed, and that's facilitated, that's helped everyone. But when you look at the underlying portfolio quality, I'm sure that's continuing to improve, and the number of startups that you can put money to work in are just 15x of what they were before, right? Or even more. So what's changing there, and what can we or the students who are dialed into this call can learn from the experiences of others and take advantage of this opportunity that exists for them today?
I think number of resources available to launch a company in Pakistan is increasing, whether it's incubation, whether it's access to finance, so all of those things are falling in place. So that's one. Number two, I think companies, that have done or scaled like Kareem in the region, the Raz, that has also helped, a large talent pool learn how to build and start new companies and then grow them at scale. So that talent is now, starting new companies, and very similar to whether that was Silicon Valley, whether that's China, maybe half the companies in China are linked to Alibaba and Tencent employees. So there's a lot of that. And then the other interesting thing is, as more and more capital is available, experienced resources, whether that's companies like Unilever or other established companies, their talent pool is also taking that leap of faith towards entrepreneurship. So that's why you're seeing a lot more talent. And then lastly, experienced Pakistani founders that have worked in other tech companies, whether that's in the US or other parts of the world, also beginning to think of coming back to start new companies. So that's why we're seeing a lot of deal flow, and then that attracts more capital, and the cycle continues.
That's great. Faisal, let me ask you the same question. I mean, you've made a number of investments through your previous fund and through this one. So what do you look for in entrepreneurs, and what can students at LUMS do to increase their chances of being looked at by somebody like yourselves for an investment?
First of all, echo everything that Ali is saying. I agree with a lot of that stuff, that these are the changes that have happened. In general, I mean, I think we all have our own styles. What I look for is really, it comes out of the pre-seed level or seed level, is the tenacity of the founders. So do they understand the business, how their execution ability? And so that would be less so on a spreadsheet, more so in, meet interactions with them and asking questions, just like, friends would discuss the potential business opportunity. because you're really just taking a massive leap of faith. But what I have seen is Ali was also mentioning some of this in his talk, is that the founders that we saw, let's say like 2-3 years ago, or even 4 years ago, the experience or the people that actually took a leap of faith back then and actually went into entrepreneurship, the quality was far less than what we're seeing today, because people like Omair are willing to move back from high paying jobs in New York to basically enter the space, right? And we're seeing this across the board. I think from a LUMS point of view, from a student's point of view that want to enter the technology space or join a venture, what my recommendation would be that you don't need to be just a tech person. As these companies are getting built, people need all facets of it to get filled up, whether it's the CFO, whether it's your marketing head or commercial officers, operations officers, and I mean, I can just go, these are actual companies, right? Just like what these the big FMCG companies or the current ideal employers are out there. Just think of it more from a point of view of that you're building the next big potential company. So you'll see the scaling where companies like Abhi or a lot of these companies that have been funded in the last year, over the next 2-3 years, this is not going to be like your traditional industrial age growth. It's going to be very parabolic growth. So some of these companies will go from a valuation of 5 million to 200 million within a span of like 36 months. And to be a part of something like that, that's where true wealth was created, even in Silicon Valley, where you take that basically not your quintessential job at Lockheed Martin per se, but you take it at Google, right? Just giving comparisons of the one versus the other. And a lot of people that did do that ended up taking a big risk, but they also ended up clipping a lot of the upside in terms of Google's growth. So those are just considerations. I think individually, we all have our different risk profile. I do think that this is we can't compare this cycle to the 2010s or the 2000s in terms of growth, because to me, this is at least the exponential age of technology, where by 2030, the pace of adoption this decade is going to be probably 20x faster than it's been over the last 50 years, right? And you're going to see Pakistan leapfrog in tech adoption, just like what we saw, let's say, with the landline telephones, when people were waiting in queues to basically get a landline telephone installed at their house. I think most of the audience probably don't even have any connectivity with that or recall of that. And then when the cell phone technology was launched and towers were launched, we saw effectively such a leapfrog of adoption, where even the corner shop individual had a cell phone. So these are some things to consider, that the pace with which we're going to see this adoption and growth is going to be massive. I'll leave it in terms of market cap, because obviously that's where these companies are going to grow. If you look at India's stock market today, it's at roughly 2.54 trillion in collective market cap. By Morgan Stanley, in fact, projects it by 2030 to be roughly around a 7 trillion market cap. If you look at the S&P 500, today it's roughly 30% of the market cap is made up by big tech. So if you extrapolate from that, India should be somewhere around like effectively 10%. I'm just being, conservative, let's say, over the next decade in terms of market caps of tech companies. In Pakistan, our stock market currently is about 1.82% of India. I still think we have a 10x growth in the stock market. So let's say, we would be sitting somewhere around speculatively like 750 billion in market cap. And that is possible given that obviously the way money is being hyperinflated. So we're seeing, $1 billion now is like what $100 million was 10 years ago. So at that stage, 10% of that, 400 billion is what I was going to say. 10% of that would be 45 billion. I think, even if it's 30 billion, that's 30 billion of growth coming. And that's going to be new wealth created and new jobs created. So if I was in people's shoes, this is probably the generational opportunity where you can actually jump into building a new cycle effectively.
At the outset, I made this bold comment as well, which I 100% echo what you just said, that this is, nobody has had as good an opportunity before this generation, and nobody will have one after this. And really the window is now, I think, and for people to really capitalize on that, I think, would really be beneficial. Omair, would you mind talking a little bit about your experience going through an incubation program at Y Combinator and how that helped you? Because obviously, that's a preeminent, incubation center around the world that everyone hopes to emulate and create success stories out of. So you went into that program having had, probably over a decade worth of experience working for large, global, blue chip organizations. Why did you need to do that, and how did that add value? You had all the right degrees, you had all the experience. Why go through the trouble of an incubation program?
I'd say one thing, I'm not as smart as everyone else on this panel. I did go to very large schools, and so for me, I was able to get into strong institutions through hard work and grit, and passion. And the difference between working with large institutions and then going from a 30,000 foot view to then going literally on the street and starting a company, it's very different. So suddenly you need to learn humility, which you should have anyway, but you need to understand the grit as well that's required to be able to start a company from scratch. Y Combinator is probably a boot camp. I call it the accelerated boot camp MBA for entrepreneurship. You are interacting with multi-billion-dollar companies, with their CEOs, CFOs, who run you through the early days. I think the problem is when you read Medium or you're reading TechCrunch, etc., there is a romanticized version of what is entrepreneurship. And everyone jumps to the idea that, yeah, I go into entrepreneurship, start my own company, I'm going to be $1 billion company tomorrow. It's like, no, there's a journey to that. And it teaches you the basics of what's required for you to really focus. Because otherwise, the amount of noise that is there when you are an entrepreneur, it's a very solo journey. And you can easily get swayed and distracted by all the headlines of people raising more money, or things happening abroad, or something happening domestically, or your competitor. Doesn't make a difference. This really teaches you tunnel vision, focus on what you are trying to build at that early stage to be able to create a company, and then guide you through the next stages for you able to grow that company into something even more formidable. So it was 3 months long. It's taxing. It's a great program, but it doesn't stop there. You're interacting with them constantly, even after that, where they help you saying, okay, now you're going to your Series A, for example, this is how we should be doing it. They connect you to some of the best investors in the world. You're able to connect to some of the best founders. We have one-on-ones, for example, the likes of Airbnb, Stripe. I mean, these are massive companies now, and we're having one-on-ones with the CEOs who are telling you from that, saying, listen, don't worry about what you see right now. This is what you need to be focusing on. So it's it doesn't matter about your educational background. It doesn't matter what institution you came from. Being an entrepreneur and running a business, you can get the smartest person in the room and you can fail. It's not about how smart you are. It's about your grit.
I would 100% echo that, right? Like, I mean, I didn't, in the interest of time, did not talk about what academic or curriculum training that we go through, but our programming is based very much on boot camp style. So there are 8 different boot camps that we do, from building core skill sets and enhancing your applied abilities, with really a focus on doing a crash course, a mini MBA of sorts, albeit with a focus on not awarding a degree, but to enable people to work on their specific deliverables. So every single deliverable people work on is targeted to their business plan for their own venture. And this ranges from the strategy, market access, market research, design thinking, financial modeling, accounting and finance for startups, focusing on legal aspects of entrepreneurship, from IP protection laws to incorporation, capital raising, how to negotiate, so on and so forth, to wrapping it up with sort of communication effectiveness. and how to pitch the story, how to build the story, how to captivate people's imagination that they are intrigued to come to you. We do all of this actually with that exact thinking that you just described, with a set of core skills development that level sets the playing field for people to be, able to talk intelligently with investors and present their case compellingly. Albeit, in the Pakistani version of Y Combinator. So, even though I think the point I was trying to underscore is that the fact that you've had tremendous experience globally, you possess the personal capabilities of great resilience that's necessary for any entrepreneur, you still found the incubation program to be quite successful. So, with that in mind, just final sort of, round of questions, what advice, starting with you, Ali, that you would give the students at LUMS today, and how they can sort of embark upon their entrepreneurial journey. And then we'll go to Faisal and finally to Omair.
I think, passion as well as persistence. So go after things that you really care about, and then try to solve those problems. And then I think you have to be able to, go past the first rejection, and sooner or later, if you will understand, whether what you're building, and if you're convinced, I think you can start to convince other people. But at the same time, speed of execution is everything. So you need to be able to, do that, fail fast, understand why you failed, and then quickly move on.
And you're an advisory board member at NIC. You're an early supporter of NIC through your substantial sponsorship of the Makers Lab at NIC. You're also active participant as a foundation council member. You've seen all kinds of startups coming from everywhere. Like, what's the distinctive edge do you think that NIC at LUMS has that perhaps can really accelerate people's ability to convert their ideas into sort of viable ventures?
I think overall, NIC plays a critical role, all the way, depending on the needs of the business. So early on, from idea stage to, giving you the right tools to be able to think through the right, problems that you need to be solving for. And at the same time, the network that it's been able to build of all the people who are here in terms of, investors, the network of LUMS, other entrepreneurs, all under one roof. So I think that can really help, and give a sense of community that you can leverage to be able to bounce back ideas and then develop businesses. So I think that network over time will, continue to grow.
It's great. Faisal? Faisal's also, by the way, a foundation council member. I mean, everybody here today is involved with NIC, and the most recent joiner in the foundation council is Omair. So we welcome him also to the team.
Sure. Salim, so look, sorry, could you repeat the question slightly? Was it
yeah, so I think the focus was really just building upon from what Omair was saying, somebody with significant work experience, education and so on and so forth, yet he benefited from a Y Combinator. So we don't have Y Combinator in Pakistan yet, at least, but we have NIC. And you've been integrally involved in the NIC sort of Foundation Council over the past year. How do you see, us bringing value to folks that have ideas that they would want to operationalize into tangible businesses that they want to launch?
Yeah, look, so I mean, I think NIC's that ecosystem environment where you can actually come in. I mean, so how does one take a leap, right? It's a thought process. And you eventually need someone to cultivate that thought process, because nobody's born with these instincts on how to build a company or be an entrepreneur. So I think having an environment where you can literally walk down to the other person across the hall and ask a question, whether it's a tech question, whether it's a marketing question, how did you get adoption for your company, or how did you spend your customer acquisition dollars? So I think it's that really that values the ecosystem. And then obviously panels like this, where you're getting a chance to, talk to, hear perspectives from different people, ask questions. Really, I mean, I would constantly recommend, and I would recommend that everybody look at these type of environments, especially NIC being part of the one of the best institutions in Pakistan. I think it gives you a lot of depth. What I will say at a broader level, though, for everyone, is that as you're entering the workforce or entering, independence, you can say, in your life, I would really think very carefully in terms of the choices you make, because this isn't our parents' world, and the advice they're giving is from their perspective in life, which was a very different world. And I do think that this decade, it's almost like living somewhere around 1939, where the world just changed drastically subsequently. So I would really, try to carve your own path and understand that how things are going to be so different by 2030. And really, when you're entering the workforce, you think more along the lines of, I just need a job, but you don't want to be displaced mid-career, because a lot of traditional jobs may not exist by 2030 or 2035. And so taking that leap of faith into tech or entrepreneurship, while it looks very risky today, it may be something in hindsight that may turn out to have played out quite well. So just some outside the box thinking, and wanted to leave that as parting words.
Great. And any final words of wisdom from Omair here?
Yeah, don't do it for the glory, because the glory is short-lived. It's very tedious. Have persistence, be humble, because and know what you don't know. That's the biggest part, I think. And this is one thing which I think, coming from the academic world or being from large institutions, there's a level of hubris that's there. You don't know anything. And you may have a great idea, and it's not about how smart you are. It's about knowing what you don't know and acing those areas, because that's what really is going to make the difference. So have humility, have perseverance, and know what you don't know.
You've stolen some of my favorite lines, Omair. I couldn't agree more with that. Look, we could go on forever. There's a litany of questions popping up on the chat. We just don't have time for that right now. We invite folks who are asking these questions to engage with NIC and get access to these wonderful folks who ever so graciously give their precious time to us, for which I'm personally indebted. So thank you guys. Appreciate it very much. Ali, especially you. It's 1:30 in the morning here. Thanks for staying up to do this.